sort of wipe off the seat and make room for David Stokes, Executive Director of the Great Rivers Habitat Alliance. That's his official title, but his unofficial title is Friend of the Big 550, KTRS. David Stokes, thanks for coming in. You're always welcome here, my friend.
Good morning, McGraw. Good morning, Kelly.
Good morning. It's been a while.
Yes, it has been a while. That's because you have been successfully keeping people from building in floodplains, so you don't need us as much as you did before.
I wish. I wish. We're trying. We're trying.
What is going on with this Hazelwood Business Park?
Well, Hazelwood, it never stops, to quote one of our board members when he read about this the other week. It never stops. And now Hazelwood is the latest city to consider a major floodplain development in the area a little bit north of 370 there.
Okay.
Sort of near the Hazelwood Mills Mall, a little bit north of it. I'm going to learn.
The Hazelwood Mall is sort of gone belly up, right? It's closed now.
Right. It's just been a disaster of disasters.
Right.
I don't think you can fail anymore. The Hazelwood Mills Mall failed.
And that is an epic failure. I think the only thing still working is the Blues practice facility there.
Oh, I think there's a few stores on the outskirts.
Okay.
I think the Cabela's is still open.
Okay.
But for the most part, it's been.
Yeah, I think it sold for like $12 not too long ago.
Right.
And I'm not joking. It was
on the courthurhouse steps, it was.
Yeah, you could have had the whole thing for $12. Yeah, crazy. All right. So So in that area, what's going on?
But they're going forward with yet another floodplain development proposal a little bit north of there. They want to do one of those light industrial distribution centers now, which are all the rage, and it just people. Well, look, we're coming up on the second anniversary of the major New Year's flood.
Yes.
Of 2 years ago. We just had another major flood in April and May of this year, and yet we continue to authorize floodplain developments throughout the region. And Hazelwood's just next, and it's not going to stop. And this story came out just a few days after a big New York Times story came out with a story out of Houston that could have been easily repeated in St. Louis. And all these are available at the Great Rivers Habitat Alliance Facebook page.
Right.
All these stories here. And the New York Times story was just all about how people bought homes in parts of Houston, and they were told by the developers and by FEMA and by everybody that this is well out of the floodplain. And here they are. A hurricane comes in, and they're swamped underwater. And yes, that had an immense amount of rainfall in that particular hurricane.
Right. They also had levees fail and everything else there.
It was a disaster. But that story I can't tell you how many scores of people along the Merrimack and elsewhere in this region over the past few years have told me my house was destroyed, my house was flooded. I was told by FEMA that I was 5 feet out of the floodplain when I bought this house. Right. Or when I built this house. And our information is so bad, our information is outdated. But in defense of the people who try to do those floodplain maps, every time you do them, and then a month later, some municipality in the region approves the latest strip mall in the floodplain.
Right.
It changes the map completely.
Right, because you're changing the flow of the river, therefore something downriver and or upriver is affected. Let's go back to this Hazelwood thing for a second. So where is it? Is this just being proposed? Are they building it? Have they signed off on it? Where are they with this thing?
They're discussing it tomorrow night at the Hazelwood City Council meeting.
Right.
I think it's 7 or 7:30 up in Hazelwood. And I would hope that some people from that region would get out opposed to this. This is not the type of development that we need. We have plenty of space out of the floodplain to build these things. All right, that's the crazy part here. It's not like these things don't exist. If the shopping mall isn't built in the floodplain, there's still places to sell stuff and places to distribute stuff. But it's a little more expensive. And somehow these cities just are at the beck and call of developers that say, well, we have to rezone it if they ask us to.
Right.
Well, they don't.
Where are we? Are they asking for some type of Hazelwood tax rebate, TIF money?
They will.
TDT or whatever else?
Absolutely. That's part of the discussion tomorrow night.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So they're going to take our tax dollars, pay less in tax to build in a floodplain, and then flood the house down the street.
repeat over and over. And then when a major flood comes in the region a year or two from now, we'll say, well, man, the crazy rainstorm, nothing we can do about it. Nothing
Who
at all
knew it was going to rain?
Who knew? But it's funny. We laugh because if you don't laugh, you'll cry. We're doing it ourselves over and over. And if people are listening and they're furious, I hope they are.
Right.
But I hope they turn that fury into action. And you have to contact these local officials and say, no,
right.
we don't want you to approve this.
The dirty little secret is the reason why these floodplains are so sought after is because, and this is the dirt, I mean, this is really criminal. Nobody else wanted to build there because it was a floodplain.
Exactly. And we didn't used to subsidize these developments until 20, 25 years ago.
Right.
So you used to have to take on the risk yourself.
Right.
And before all the subsidies came about, nobody would do that.
Right.
Thank God.
Right.
That was the smart move.
Right. So Creve Coeur stops at the hill because down the hill it floods. So that's why there are no houses in the Earth City area, because that all floods. And so that's why it's cheap land, because it's swampland.
And now we've decided that, well, we can't, it's too costly to build up high, or it's too costly to redevelop the parts of the area. Look at Manchester Road. I mean, the line is, every time there's a brand new development on Manchester Road, it's next to an empty development on Manchester Road in West County, where people shut down because they got the subsidy to move a few blocks.
Right.
So it's too expensive to rehab or rebuild the already developed areas. And you know what? But the cities don't have to give all these subsidies in the floodplain.
Right.
Yet they do over and over in Chesterfield and Maryland Heights and the city of St. Louis and cities within St. Charles. The counties are pretty good generally.
Well, and this is also an offshoot of the small towns, right? If one small town says no, they can go to another small town, and they can keep going to these small towns till they find a small town who will bite on it.
Absolutely. It completely relates to the fragmentation of the region.
Yeah.
Something that this connection is something that we've discussed for years on this show. That, look, there's so many examples. We've talked about dozens of them over the past 7 or 8 years.
Right.
The most obvious one is the Walmart that was split between two cities.
Was that the one on St. Charles?
St. Anne and I forget the neighboring city it was in.
Yeah.
And then one city said, well, we'll give you millions of dollars of subsidies to move all into our city. I mean, no economic growth was created with that move. None whatsoever.
They moved a Walmart 2 miles down the road.
All to be within one city. Everything stayed the same economically. The tax base declined.
Yeah. David Stokes, Executive Director of Great Rivers Habitat Alliance. So the meeting is when?
Means tomorrow night, Hazelwood City Hall.
Are you going to go and testify?
I am.
When you go and testify and you bring this up to the powers that be, what kind of reaction do you get?
They either rarely do I get something positive. Rarely do they say, "Thanks for coming, Dave. thanks for bringing this to our." It's one of these days that might happen.
But I mean, you're
do
the
they say
night.
we're going to look into it, or
it's generally polite. I don't want to say ignore, but politely just saying thank you for speaking.
Right.
Sometimes they get upset and yell back at you. You know, it's the same story. We're here. We're elected to create jobs for our city.
Right.
That's that line. As if your city is more important than the St. Louis region.
Right.
And as if these subsidies for your city actually led to economic growth of the region, I might buy into it.
Right.
But we know study after study shows that this subsidy-based development game does not lead to regional growth at all. It leads to it's economically bad for the region.
Right. They're also elected to make sure my house doesn't flood. Right? I mean, that's sort of why they're there, too, to make sure that whatever happens, my house stays out of the floodplain.
Well, and that's where the allowance of fill, which is a real issue that has to be addressed at the national level, that you can just go in and buy dirt from elsewhere and take your land out of the floodplain.
Right.
And it's very easy to do.
Right.
You just raise it up. Of course, the problem with this is you then put somebody else into the floodplain. I mean, by definition, when you take your land out, you put somebody else in, and it is way too simple to do this. The regulations, the rules, the market failure here is substantial.
David Stokes, you have educated us all on all of this, so we thank you for that. People are actually listening, so do not give up the fight. For people to find out more about your organization,
grha.org. That's a simple website, grha.org. We have an active Facebook page. You can follow me on Twitter at David C. Stokes.
You know what you should do? You should put out a list of elected officials who are doing the right thing. Could be a short list, but it'd still be a list.
I'll tell you, a lot of the county officials in St. Charles, like County Executive Steve Ailman, some of the council members, Joe Brazel, Joe Cronin, some of the others, those are some examples of people doing the right thing. And some of the county officials in St. Louis and Jefferson County, because they take a more regional viewpoint. They're elected to represent a county, not the narrow interest of a city.
Interesting.
So the county officials are often better at this.
Yeah. David Stokes, happy birthday, Merry Christmas, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Festivus. We'll see you in the new year.
Happy holidays, McGraw and Kelly. Great to be
Same to
great to be
you.
on the air with you guys.
You're always